I despise Koyomi Araragi. If I had to say how much I hated him, my goodness, I'm on the verge of fainting out of sheer hate. Just by thinking about him, my chest tightens in pain. I stop being able to think about anything else. Even if all the hate in this world were gathered up like a bouquet, it would be no match against my singular hate for Araragi. My hatred rivals even the sun. If I were to lose this revulsion, I'm sure would no longer be myself. My rampant contempt for Araragi is my identity as an individual, the axis of my being, the dead center of my very self. If didn't hate him, it would be impossible for me to be me. Because whatever kind of cruelty I see, whatever kinds of tragedies and calamities I confront, by thinking, compared with meeting that man, I can endure any adversity. I am very afraid that this hate, that this dizziness, heartburn, nausea, shivering, goosebumps, that it will end up disappearing from inside of me. If my will to never forgive him erodes just a little bit, just from imagining it, it'll seem like I've died. That's how fragile I am, that's how impudent he is, inside of me. Hasn't he wrought this much hatred in me with his own hands? I feel such disgust for that man that I don't have a single spare moment to feel any kind of sensible doubt. Just by remembering Araragi's smiling face, his kindness, his concern, his friendship, every single one of his behaviors, I feel like weeping. Whatever kind of great wealth and fortune I'm offered, whatever kind of gruesome torture I receive, I cannot be made to reconcile with Araragi. That is the one thing I will not permit, the one thing I will not yield. Hate with hate by hate for hate to hate of hate at hate of hate. I hate him, 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 I hate him. I hate him, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him, I hate 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 hate. Hate 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 hate. Hate 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 him. I'm sure that this feeling is even more intense than love. It's already been more than a month since I left Naoetsu High School. Everything that happened there, even the incident in that classroom which, like a curse, has not ceased coiling tightly around my inner heart, has become nostalgic. To the extent I can say, I still haven't succumbed to forgetting any of it, but being separated from it like this, I somehow feel as if it all was a dream. I don't mean that as a lyrical cliche, like, but that dream was really a nightmare. When I say dream, I mean that literally. Incoherent, nonsensical, scattered from place to place, an ambiguous and vague center, boundlessly vast, and yet all that faintly remained with me was something like the dregs of an impression, that kind of elusive dream. Even if a long time were to pass, and I could no longer remember the layout of that classroom, I doubt I could ever put that class behind me. I wonder if that man is haunted by it as well. Thinking about that is a little thrilling. And so, today, I begin a new high school life in a new town. I had no choice in the matter, though. I was an exile banished from my hometown, and, slipping into feelings of desperation, I thought about just quitting high school once and for all, but that was easier said than done. No matter what it might be, quitting something is a very hard thing to do. Quitting high school was just as difficult as committing suicide. At least get through high school. And I never imagined there would be someone to say that hackneyed line to me. I'd thought it was an artificial expression, as suspicious and shameless as saying that life is very precious and all people are equal. Nevertheless, when it was said to me, I was affected. Well, I guess that's right. Moreover, the one who said it was my guardian, so as a dependent I was in no position to do anything but hang my head and go along. Of course, when I say guardian, I don't mean a parent. I have no parents. No father, no mother. They're gone. They went away. So the guardian I'm talking about here refers to the benevolent couple who, despite having no relation and being complete strangers, decided to look after an orphan with no relatives. The Jacob couple. Probation officers, well, not quite, but for an easy comparison, I suppose they're like foster parents. Having left Naoetso High School after many twists and turns, I became restless and flighty, and I found myself deciding that the home of an elderly couple would be my next destination. The room I was given was even bigger than the public apartment where I'd lived before. The town hall person ought to have been able to arrange for me to keep living by myself even after leaving town, but for reasons I simply can't fathom, that's how it turned out, though I guess it's typical of me to get swept away in a flow of events I don't really understand. Maybe they had to put a stop to a parentless minor living alone, or maybe, by a stroke of luck, this unfortunate girl just happened to catch the eyes of a wealth family. A stroke of luck? Me? That's funny. Of course, after returning to my senses from my confused state, I might have stubbornly refused at the last minute, and I probably could have maintained the solitary lifestyle of an outcast, but following much hesitation, I decided to come into the care of the Jacob family. My reasons were a mystery, even for me. Honestly, it would be hard to say that I had no feelings of nostalgia, although the time when I'd taken refuge in the home of complete strangers is nothing but a miserable memory for me. It's one of my only memories of a home. A meager memory. I wanted to live in a home. If that was the reason, it's a paltry one, or rather, a pitiful one, or even a perverse one. You could call that slipping into desperation too. At this point, a wretched girl like me has no hope of building real relationships with people. If it were 1 month ago, I might have believed that and stubbornly insisted on it, but whether it's paltry or pitiful or perverse, if I kept insisting that now, I'd feel a sense of defeat. Like I'd lost to that man. If he's changed, then I'll change too. If he's happy, then I'll become happier. That was my deepest desire, and I could give up on everything else for its sake. So, I decided to attend high school from the Jacob home. Although I was told that it wouldn't be a problem for me to attend a private school since I was receiving financial assistance from the government, I of course declined, and decided to transfer to a public high school. That said, even I have some points of pride, and even though that pride had been my downfall, it wasn't something I could easily abandon, so I chose to transfer to the school with the highest test scores in the area. I easily passed the entrance examination. The marvelous fruits of having nothing to do but study during my period of truancy. Well, since I'm transferring in November in second term, I won't be at this school for more than 4 months. And actually, since third years don't really have a third term, it might be as short as 1 month. So it won't feel at all like an alma mater, and I'm not thinking of spreading roots here. I can't say I was happy when I attended Naoetso High School either, but in the end it's that school, and that classroom, where my roots are more intertwined. I don't suppose there could ever be a crueler classroom than that one, and that's enough to get me through my first day as a transfer student. But I've got to be on my guard. After all, it's in my nature to think up plans to the point of absurdity, and fail spectacularly in ways I couldn't foresee. This short month of school life is just a bonus of a bonus, but if I want to spend it peacefully and uneventfully, I need to be prepared. Aji-sama, Oba-sama, see you later. Saluting the Jacob couple, I departed. My break is over. I don't even know when it started, but my break is over, and I'm setting out toward a new life. Just you wait, Araragi. Sodachi AKIRA is going to grow up. 003. The first person to make meringues was incredible, don't you think? Cracking an egg and separating the yolk from the whites is an earth-shattering idea in itself, but to think they'd beat only the whites instead of the yolk, which you can tell at a glance is more abundant in nutrients. There's no way they could have predicted that if they beat just the egg whites, if they kept patiently beating and whipping the egg whites, then it would turn into something like whipped cream, is there? And then they took the tasteless, flavorless thin foam and baked it into a dessert. It's simply astonishing. This is no good. Rejected, rejected, totally rejected. Would anyone introduce themselves like that? If a transfer student greeted people like that on her first day, her nickname would inevitably become meringue. If they could cleverly derive wrench from it, then that would be quite fortuitous, but rather than bet on a miracle like that, the correct decision would be to not present myself as a weirdo in the first place. My intention was to act cutesy by saying my hobby was making sweets, but when I tried to show off a strong point of mine, my thought process got out of whack. Calm down, there's no need to make people think I'm a girl who has weird opinions. Well, it might become necessary in certain situations, but I'm not obligated to present my idiosyncrasies to classmates I'll only have for a single month. Uneventful. My first priority is to make it to graduation without any of the hardships I encountered at Naoetsu High School. I don't need to display my idiosyncrasies, I need to temper and conceal their presence. I have to get down from the conspicuous position of transfer student as quickly as possible. I don't need any of those transfer student tropes you see all the time in manga. It's going to be alright. I'm cute, under normal circumstances. It's true that I've been through hell, but the only person who's hit me in the face is Hitagi Senjugahara. I actually had some friends at Naoetsu High School. A boy even confessed to me. If I can just keep silent, I should at least be able to meet the vague expectations people have of transfer students. Just by wearing a uniform, my apparently abnormal fashion sense can be smoothed over. I just have to avoid doing anything stupid. Nice to meet you, my name is Sodachi AKIRA. I'm sorry for disturbing you by transferring partway through the term. It seems like graduation will be here before we know it, but even so, I look forward to working with you as a member of the class. That's it. The right banality. Aim to be normal. Present yourself as harmless and unexceptional. There's zero need to tell them that I revere the mathematician Euler, much less to request they call me that. I don't have to announce out loud all of the people I idolize. They'll be disappointed. Try to be ordinary is itself a fairly childish way of thinking, but this is probably what it means to become an adult, not feeling sorry for myself. Let's rid ourselves of that unproductive self-pity. As long as I consider myself unfortunate, I'll stay unfortunate my whole life. Well, there's no question my life has been laughably unfortunate, no matter how you stretch it to try to interpret it positively. If you probe it too far, you won't want to solve the mystery, but rather to be put out of your misery. Point 2. If anyone told me, it's all in the way you look at things, I'd kill them. However, being unfortunate doesn't mean you can't find happiness. If I find happiness, I'll say it's all in the way you look at things too. I'll rub it in his face. I'll do anything for that. That said, no matter how worked up I get about it, I can't shake this deep-set feeling that it's all futile, that it's all a waste of effort. As you can see from my extraordinary disgust and outrageous hatred for him, Koyomi Araragi's presence within me is gigantic. However, the Sodachi Oikira inside of Koyomi Araragi is nothing more than one of many. Not even one of many, maybe nothing at all. I don't know how many times he's forgotten me. How many times he's ignored me, or pretended I didn't exist. Come to think of it, that might have actually been a form of special treatment, but that's no reason for me to accept it, and I think he's just fundamentally hopeless. He's a hero who doesn't even remember the face of the person he saves. Even if it's hard for me to understand, after everything I've been through, I have no choice but accept that people like that exist in the world. It's not just him, all the members of the Araragi family are the same way, and I'm sure the Hakob couple will be no exception. I'll never be able to be like that though, nor do I want to be. Even if I get past this misery and find happiness, he'll just congratulate me with a cheerful, carefree "good for you." That's an extremely vexing prospect. I ended up thinking about it. What should I do? How would things have to happen for me to be able to argue him down? I shudder to think that he'll just give me a pleasant and soothing response no matter what I do, and no matter what happens. But there's one thing of which I'm certain, absolutely certain. If that man found out that I'd become excessively isolated, or caused problems in my new school, he'd be very sad. Nothing would bring me as much joy as making him feel bad, but, well, I've already done that stuff. In a way, that would just be what he'd expect. I don't want him to think, I guess that's just the way she is. Doing well at my new school would be the best way to betray Araragi. The first step toward that goal is to aim to be normal. With a smug look, I'll let him know that being normal is the best way to happiness. Resolving to make that happen, I arrived at Shishikurasaki Public High School, which was located 3 stops away from the Heikob's house. Before even entering the school, I'd started mixing in with other students wearing the Shishikurasaki uniform on the way. They were unfamiliar. That is to say, these boys and girls seemed somehow different from the students at Naoetsu High School. It might just be my prejudice, but I sensed a certain calmness in their expressions. At Naoetsu High School, a private, college prep school, every last one of us was driven, myself included. Everyone was on edge. Of course, I enrolled because I had wanted an environment like that, so I have no reason to be critical. Can people really change this much just from being in a different environment? I unconsciously started feeling envious and viewing my surroundings as hostile, but I realized what was happening and hurriedly got myself under control. This is no good. I can easily develop an inferiority complex toward anyone and everyone. It's my worst aspect. I know that. I construct myself by envying others. How to put it? It takes a lot of courage to accept that you're a good-for-nothing person, which is a pretty sad thing in the first place, but that's probably just what I need right now. No doubt everyone feels that way to some extent, but as long as I keep thinking this way, I'll never advance even a single step forward. It's as if I'm standing still, facing backwards. If you perceive anything and everything to be a competition or a struggle, you'll constantly build up stress. And besides, there's no way the students at this school get on without any stress. It's not possible. Stress always starts to build up when people are gathered together, which gives rise to discord. That's precisely why I mustn't be careless. My isolation in that classroom at Naoetsu High School was due more to arrogance than carelessness, but if I'm negligent, I'll end up committing the same ugly mistakes all over again. It's not unlikely I'll become a hikikomori again. We might not understand each other yet, but I don't want to make the Heikobs regret taking me in. I don't know what the future holds. I think it would be terribly shameless for a freeloader like me to try to go on to college after graduating high school, but actually, such a future is possible for me if I make full use of subsidies and student loans. Those safety nets are strung throughout the world. I just couldn't see them. No, I hadn't even tried to see them. Naturally, it's hard to feel blessed based on that knowledge alone, but at the very least, I suppose I'm lucky to have been born in a place like this. So, I've got to get the most out of it that I can. Standing in front of the school gates, lost in thought, I began to feel like I was being glanced at repeatedly by passers-by. It might be excessive self-consciousness, or my persecution complex, or perhaps there was something odd about the way I was wearing my uniform. Although I knew that I was just being looked at for being a nuisance, and a bother by obstructing passage, I got an urge to look in a mirror, and in my effort to escape I hastily stepped toward my new school. It was a disappointing way to take my first step. 004. In the end, when I introduced myself for the first time to my new comrades, it was less a bright, sunny moment in the spotlight and more of a cloudy, overcast debut. It was difficult to say I did well. If anything, it was a massive failure, certainly not any kind of success. I tried my best to be ordinary, and I hadn't planned to display any eccentricities, but before I managed to struggle to the end of my script, I got disgracefully flustered. I'm sure there's no small number of students who think my name is Ashikura now. Bathing in the stares of 40 people, I was overcome with stage fright. My tongue went round and round in snarls, and my voice became shamefully shrill and hollow. I don't know how many words I flubbed during my self-introduction. It was more words than I managed to get right. I was so embarrassed, I wanted to lean over to avoid eye contact. I'd like to praise myself for at least being able to stay standing upright until the very end. I did well. At not doing well, that is. This isn't how I wanted to remember it. That it had ended up like this despite the perfectly plausible plan I had developed beforehand seemed more embarrassing than anything. But this is how I am now. If I'm surrounded by a crowd of people, when they all look at me, it seems like they're finding fault, and I can't hold on to my sanity. It's starting to feel like everyone's laughing at my big failure. Calm down, regain your composure. In reality, even though I've become the target of that laughter for my comical stuttering, it's not like I'm being showered in scorn. It's not like there's any more ill will in that laughter. Those boys and girls are only laughing in amusement. I'm being made fun of just the proper amount. In the first place, I had only wanted to handle my self-introduction flawlessly, though it was a failure, and even though I had wanted to be told, "You're so good at making speeches," not to mention pampered for my success, it wasn't like I wanted to become a popular person in the class. Hadn't I learned well in my previous school that that kind of fighting for a brittle hegemony was so very foolish? Get some self-control, analyze yourself. Just like when solving a tricky, complicated math problem, it becomes simple when you follow the procedure and apply the formula. I can arrange all of this like data. The reason why I become obstinate when facing this crowd, and why I freeze up in front of a large number of people, is that I'm scared of these boys and girls. If a crowd of conspirators form up to wield violence against me, I'd be at my wits' end all by myself, but it's all right. No one is going to hit or beat me here. There aren't that many crazy people who would get up and kick me because I messed up my self-introduction, and besides, since I'd be frightened of humiliation, it's fine if I don't stand at the top of the group. Rather, because I'm guilty of trying to force myself to the top, I was driven out by the group. I need to understand that I am not a person who can give orders to a crowd, nor stand above them. At least, not anymore. I have a bad personality. I'm uncooperative. I degrade myself. I'm spiteful. I'm jealous. I'm distrusting. I'm charmless. I have a powerful victim complex. I'm hysteric. I'm a fool who boasts of intelligence. I'm a masochist. I'm easily intoxicated by my own misfortune. I blame anything and everything on others, on Araragi. Fundamentally, there's no way someone like that could become a popular person just by doing somewhat well with their self-introduction. After all, it would be improper to somehow use my status as an end-of-term transfer student as a veil to mask my own ugly nature. There's no such thing as magic, and people don't suddenly change like that. I moved to a different city, I'm living in a different house, going to a different school, wearing a different uniform, but it's not as if I've changed. I am me, and that skin doesn't come off. Fine. Taking a disappointing first step toward a new life, I ended up stumbling spectacularly, but I can't say I completely fell over. I didn't flip over the teacher's desk, or grab anything and throw it, or scratch on the blackboard to hide the shame of my failure. I didn't suddenly start bawling, or throw anything at the homeroom teacher. I didn't follow up my failure with an even bigger failure by taking off my uniform on the spot. See, I evaded the worst possible situation. If I say so myself, I feel as though I'm taking negative thinking to the limit by hypothesizing all these terrible situations, but I have simply no idea what I'll achieve by chasing it all the way to the end. Because at any rate, in the end my thoughts became obstinate, as jumbled up and wild as the time I exposed myself in fancy pajamas in front of the man I despise. Thinking about it, what did it matter that I wasn't at least able to say my name correctly? Certainly, I was unexpectedly embarrassed, but I wasn't trying to look cool or anything. I am truly glad I didn't talk about meringues. If I had, I fear I might have really gone crazy, and anyhow, I lost face in front of classmates I'd only be with for one short month. It's fine if I cast aside this shame. Looking forward, past graduation, I can think of this as rehabilitation. If I couldn't deal with feeling ashamed, then I couldn't very well go out into society. I'm afraid of becoming an adult while still possessing this personality. Right now, I'm 18 years old, I'm an age at which I've even been afforded the right to vote. It would certainly be a terrible thing if I haven't yet become something of a better person by the time I'm 20, no, at least by the time I'm 22. While I definitely can't say anything specific about how I'll end up, if I stay the cruel character that I am, it seems like sooner or later I'll commit a crime against society and get thrown in jail. I have to sever this chain of events before that. It'd be good to break that off now. The reasons why I'm misfortunate are innumerable, and there are infinite reasons why I'll be misfortunate from now on. However, there's not a single reason why I can't become happy. For that matter, by no means is everything about this failure today purely bad. After all, from looking at my classmates, who thought I seemed odd after I flubbed my self-introduction, I could sense the general atmosphere of the class into which I'd transferred. I could study their reactions after providing a moderate stimulus. As I expected, it's different from Naoetsu High School. For better or for worse, it felt like a standard so-called school, though I'd only experienced a very short high school life. If I were to compare the two high schools, the mood here felt closer to my time in junior high. Since a lot of people have been crammed into a narrow space, there's no doubt people here, especially people like me, felt stressful, but just as I'd thought, the stress here seemed different from at Naoetsu High School. No. What's different might be the rules. I felt as though the customs of this classroom differed in composition from those of that previous classroom. In a way, just because the deviation score was high at Naoetsu High School, the rules were reflected in the hierarchy of students. To explain it another way, however much of a good person you were, however strong your sense of justice, a man like Koyomi Araragi, for example, would be treated as the lowest type of person just for having poor grades. Even in the case of the reckoning I received at that classroom trial, it was still a trial held concerning grades. At the time, I had thought that it was a proper, ordinary school function that could be held anywhere, but thinking about it now, it was probably a highly unique event. Since Shishikurasaki High School was also a school trying to prepare students for college, I probably couldn't say that grades contributed nothing to students' social standing, but more than grades, it seemed more like human relationships that were the relevant factor. For one, it didn't seem like bringing smartphones to school had been prohibited. Such a thing had been altogether unthinkable at Naoetsu High School, and it seemed that communication prowess was an exceptionally important part of survival in this class. I fear that just having good grades might have the opposite effect, and could end up making me hated. What I ought to focus on was my charm as a person. It's good that I realized that early in the process, however, for me, that information nearly left me in despair. The reason is, well, that I could say I'm a professional at lacking charm. I could certainly brag that I wouldn't lose to any run-of-the-mill charm lackers. That, at least, hadn't been revealed by my stuttering self-introduction, but if I stay without a plan to counteract it, there's no doubt my true nature will eventually be exposed. They say that when in Rome, do as the Romans do, but that's such an unbearable regulation. Point 3. It's overly strict. On the other hand, I am not a reformer trying to propose revisions to the rules here. My social standing is that of a newcomer. Although I'm repeating myself, I'll only be here for a short time. This was just a short, 1-month sojourn into a different country with utterly different laws. It would be best to pass this time by concealing myself, lowering my head and squeezing myself in so as to not conflict with the local culture. So to that end, while thinking of that goal, a peaceful, uneventful, no trouble and stress-free high school life, for a brief moment, my eyes fell on one particular student among my 40 classmates, or more correctly, 41 classmates. Seat number 41. Her name was Amiko Urigase. 005. When forming groups of 2, groups of 3, even groups of 4, there's always a man left out. Being the man left out was, of course, a specialty of the Araragi, whom I despise. However, since you never know when such a situation might befall you, it's better to keep a clear head and think of how best to avoid being the odd one out. Always have a partner in mind for a possible group of 2. It's a purely academic theory, but if I had a partner like that, then I'd obviously always form a group of 2 with them, and it'd be reassuring to pair with them when forming groups of 3 and groups of 4 as well. I wouldn't fail to find a group and get left out, and even if it feels like there aren't enough people to go around, my feelings of isolation should weaken. That's what I think. It would be a bit too high of a hurdle for a vagrant like me to suddenly become friendly with all 41 of my classmates, but if there's just a single person among the 40 that I can easily get along with. I wouldn't quite say easily, but I don't know how I could manage anything else if I weren't able to at least complete a low-level task like this. Well, strictly speaking, it's not a single person among the 40, but a single person among the 20-ish in this case. I couldn't imagine finding a boy to become friends with. I could even say my thinking would run in the opposite direction. At Naoetsu High School, boys and girls were mixed together, or rather boys and girls were socially equal, or rather, at least, boys and girls were mixed together on the seating chart. However, at Shishikurasaki High School, the seats in the classroom were clearly split down the middle between boys and the girls. It's based on an old-fashioned custom, at least, that's what it looked like to me, but I suppose this was very normal for most co-ed schools. So, in this kind of atmosphere, a girl trying to form a group of 2 with a boy would just negatively stand out. There'd be no benefit. The result would simply be drawing animosity upon myself, as a new girl trying to butter up the boys. A girl flirting with a boy, I could say that might just be a misunderstanding of how my situation with Araragi began, but it would certainly be harsh if I had to pass the next month with people thinking of me like that. No matter where I was, someone like me would doubtless fall into hysterics. To be frank, I fear it would bring about some kind of bloody event. So, the partner with whom I ought to make friends will be someone among the 20 or so girls who make up half the class's population. Rather than saying that would be fortunate, it might possibly be the ordinary thing to do for a normal high school student, but even though the size of this new class was at least as large as my old class, it seemed like the girls' influence was stronger than the boys'. For that matter, it seemed difficult to say that it was utterly different from the strong sense of equality at Naoetsu High School, but, well, it should certainly be better to align myself with the more influential side. Of course, this is simply a rationalization after the fact, but my bungled self-introduction also allowed my attention to be caught by the student I selected. The target with whom I ought to become friends. I fear that may lead to that look, it's the transfer student, reaction I was dreading earlier, but as I expected, as a transfer student, the first time I start a conversation with a classmate is momentous. That isn't an exaggeration, I fear that my daily life will be decided just from that. Will I start talking with a student who seems kind, or will I start talking with a student whose tastes and interests seem to match mine, or will I start talking with a leader-like person? As I'd investigated beforehand, I did investigate, there was a line of strategy and procedure to establish my personal safety by deliberately becoming closer to a group of left-out delinquents, but it appears that Shishikurasaki High School, the same as Naoetsu High School, had no obvious delinquents. The level of public morals seemed to have ensured there were no girls shortening their skirts, nor any boys unfastening their jackets. It might be more wholesome than at Naoetsu High School, where you could be forgiven for letting your clothes get out of shape if your grades were good. If I were to break the atmosphere and speak honestly about my impression, it was so overly wholesome as to be suffocating, even to a person as serious, if not plain stiff as me. Well, even if there were a group of delinquents, I don't think I'd be shrewd enough to curry favor by imitating them. If I were me from long ago, I might have been able to ignore appearances and do it, but now, it's fair to say I'd be the absolute worst at doing something like that. No, if I were me from long ago, I wouldn't have come up with all these various plans in the first place. I'd have worked out a more audacious plan. It's not like this was my first experience of transferring schools. I transferred away from the school I'd been attending back in junior high, but at that time it was more, how to put it, more of something I decided for myself. Maybe it was just desperation, but before I'd experienced that classroom trial at Naoetsu High School, I had a strong competitive spirit. I was a junior high schooler, after all. Right now, it's impossible for me to behave the same way as I did back then. I'm barely managing to hold on to my mentality as a human, and it's as if I'm just a hollow paper decoration on the inside. Even that might not be a paper decoration, but a balloon. All it takes is a light poke, and it explodes with a loud noise. I'm just like that. Although, balloon being written as if it were a boat that moves with the wind, using that word here seems excessively romantic. Even if I were able to do that, in the end I would likely just repeat the same failures as always. In order to put an end to this period of my life, with all of its failures, it's essential for me to compromise. If I were to speak of compromises I'd have to make, they would probably be, well, fine. Anyway, let's set about this objective without making any waves. Start with one person and be friends with the whole class by graduation. That would be unreasonable, of course, but I'll make at least 5 or even 6 friends. I'll make at least as many friends as I have fingers. I'm going to do well. I'll get along in the world. I'll live a peaceful, normal life in this peaceful, normal school. Thus, after much deliberation, I selected my candidate for friendship. She was the classmate I'd noticed as I was stuttering my name, Amiko Uragase. Of course, the reason I chose her wasn't necessarily unrelated to the simple fact that the seat I'd been assigned was close to hers, but that was a secondary, if not a tertiary reason. The reason I'd chosen her as my first target was more severe and straightforward, that is, it was because it seemed like she was being cut off from the rest of the class. It was hard to tell from a glance, and the homeroom teacher hadn't seemed to notice, or might just be pretending not to notice, but as far as a transfer student and outsider like me could see at a glance, she was being separated from the class. Isolation. So, it wasn't difficult to imagine that she would always be left out when the class formed groups of 2. Since 41 was a prime number, it was certainly an easy thing for people to be left over. If that's the case, then I'm sure she would be glad that the class population has increased by 1. Honestly, taking advantage of her weakness like that doesn't feel that bad, and while it's not a praiseworthy behavior, I need to use every means available to me. It would be a bit blunt to say, since we're both friendless, let's be friends, but looking at it from the point of view of supply and demand, for Amiko Uragase, building that kind of mutually beneficial relationship shouldn't be at all disadvantageous. It would surely be a sweet symbiosis. Only thinking about loss and gain and advantages and disadvantages in this situation seems like a basic character trait of mine, but even so, I can't help but delay making a decision. Well, in this world, there are people who would raise their own estimations of their value as a person for proactively starting a conversation with an isolated classmate, but I'd like to think that that kind of person doing that kind of thing is more of a self-supporting proactive endeavor. I'm sorry, but I just don't have time to help people. I'm different from that man, who'll eagerly sacrifice himself even if he can't afford to. I'm uncertain whether I even ought to treat myself as a victim. Actually, there's something I think about once in a while. Like maybe in reality, I committed suicide a long time ago, and what I'm seeing now are just vague hallucinations on the verge of death, though if that's the case, if I'm about to die, I should at least have a more pleasant fantasy, right? Even in my fantasies, I'm in hell. No matter how I think about it, the idea that happiness and misfortune just depend on how you look at things is complete nonsense without an ounce of reason, but it's probably true that you can't lead a good life if you don't have a good self-image. If that's the case, even though I have no intention of thinking of myself as a girl with a kind spirit because I ignored the atmosphere in the classroom and called out to an isolated classmate at my new school, maybe doing that will help. Well, I'm sure that's what that class rep, Tsubasa Hainkawa, would do if she were here. Though I have absolutely no intention of following that borderline monstrous honor student's example. I might really die if I tried to do that. What I mean by that is, how to put it, those eccentrics like Tsubasa Hainkawa and Koyomi Araragi that you invariably see around at Naoetsu High School wouldn't be found at this school. After all, regardless of whether they want to or not, those kinds of idiosyncratic people don't end up in an honest place like this, or no, I suppose they were peculiar types even at Naoetsu High School. Obviously, Amiko Uragase didn't seem like that at all. As a girl who was isolated from the class, at least according to that aspect of her by itself, I could classify her the same way as that girl Hitagi Senjugahara. However, I can't help but say I rather lack the knowledge to make such a categorization. She was like that when we were first years, but she was a curious type of high school girl who isolated herself of her own volition. I say this confidently because I have experience being a hikikomori, but people who truly prefer solitude wouldn't come to school in the first place. Well, when I met her again a little while ago, it seemed she'd somewhat mellowed out. If that damned Araragi had changed Hitagi Senjugahara, that's a fact I couldn't at all say about myself. Was there even a chance for me to change like that? If there was, I don't know how many times I've missed it. No. There's no question that this, right now, is the chance Araragi gave me. In that case, this time, I won't let this opportunity get away. So, I will become friends with Amiko Uragase. I'll do it. First, I need to concentrate any and all of my excessive enthusiasm on that goal. Thinking about what will happen afterward, if I end up expending all of my energy and burning all of my calories just trying to make a single friend, that might be the origin of my next failure. But just like during that classroom trial, as always, whatever I'm guilty of doing, I'm trying to do the right thing. Thinking you're mistaken doesn't mean you're mistaken. Thinking you'll be unfortunate doesn't mean you'll be unfortunate. Even if that hope is barely there. 006. As I said before, I knew of no common points between Amiko Uragase and Hitagi Senjugahara except that they were isolated. However, once I approached Amiko Uragase to talk, I couldn't help but remember the time when I first spoke with Hitagi Senjugahara. I ended up using past exam questions as a reference. Even though I shouldn't be using references. Although this is purely my own intuition, in this world, there are special people who can't be described beyond saying that they are special people, and Hitagi Senjugahara was one of those, though I wouldn't necessarily go that far. Strictly speaking, that probably just describes people like Tsubasa Hainkawa. Even so, I ought to reflect on what it means to be someone in that category of special. With the exception of Araragi, to me, everything about that man is an exception. I should have broken off completely from Naoetsu High School at this point, but even so, I couldn't forget the intense impression that girl left me. Ephemeral, with a weak constitution. As if she were really ephemeral with a weak constitution. A little while ago, on my first day of school after returning from being a hikikomori, she punched me so hard I was sent to the infirmary. However, my strong impression is not entirely due to that incident. Special people. Of course, I don't intend to keep rattling on endlessly about what makes special people special, it's just that I can't help but feel jealous. As you know, I am a person who was unable to become special to anyone, I couldn't become special to Araragi, and I couldn't become special to my mother. I can't even say I'm special to myself, but that's alright now. Since I'm not special, I can aim for mediocrity. If I can't at least do that, I won't become anything. But, even so, I ended up thinking about it. There are not very many people like Tsubasa Hainkawa or Koyomi Araragi, each of them is a single rarity among a million. I knew the emptiness of the words, all people are equal, from seeing people of their ilk, but actually, because people who give off that kind of intense individuality are one in a million, it would be difficult to even encounter one, let alone become one. That opportunity has probably passed me by already. By no means is having a relationship with a special person a purely positive influence on your life, either. I wonder how many hapless ordinary people have gotten carelessly involved with special people, and ended up manipulated, exploited, abused, and discarded. Thinking of the perils of being blinded by the special radiance of special people, the prudent choice would be to consider those men and women a risk to one's person and stay away from them. This isn't manga. It's not a world where it's fine if your character stands out. I mustn't forget that no matter how a manga protagonist acts in a story, in the end that's still antisocial behavior. It's interesting to read for pleasure, but trying to act like that in the real world would be a disaster, somehow or other. I've ended up speaking about nothing but my jealousy after all, however, instead of complaints and grumblings about those men and women. What I've been pondering is rather, how did special people become special in the first place? I'm always flustered by the argument that, although they went through the same unpleasant experiences as me, since they honestly did their best despite that, I ought not to sympathize with them just because of their unfortunate upbringing. But if I were to interpret it statistically, that is, mathematically, even though it's difficult for me to understand, I suppose I have no choice but to recognize that those words carry certain amount of truth. I wonder where I could find someone who grew up being abused by a good-for-nothing family like me, but honestly did their best and grew up to become great. Well, that's all right. But by the same logic, it seems there's a considerably dubious reason for why special people are special, though it's one that's most like me to talk about. That would be that those men and women are special because they're blessed. Born in a good area and a good family. Meeting good people. Having rare talents, afforded opportunities to work hard, but looking at it logically, those things weren't special at all, they were commonplace affairs that happen all the time. However deeply you read the trifling autobiography of a great person that's spread like a disease through bookstores, however faithfully you implement the lessons written inside, you can't replicate the same success, even if you vicariously experience the same things as that special person. It's not like you can become special yourself. There are certainly rebellious people who can't adjust to society and end up committing crimes, despite being born in a good area, born in a good family, meeting good people, having rare talents, and being afforded opportunities to work hard. Statistically, mathematically, they definitely exist. When I talk about committing crimes, that would certainly be extreme and excessive cases, but that doesn't change the fact that most people just can't become special. So, really, just when, where, and for what reason do special people become special people? Perhaps, if an abject failure of a person like me is just a statistical anomaly on the low end of the scale, then are those men and women just statistical anomalies on the high end of the scale? I could even think about it from the perspective of evolutionary biology. It might not be a statistical anomaly, but rather a genetic mutation. Those men and women had been made special for no particular reason, but simply represented an advanced form of human existence. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but if I were to think of it like that, I could comprehend it just a little bit. I could restrain my raging inferiority complex. I'd feel better if someone had told me sooner, clearly, that there was no particular reason for those anomalies, that I don't have to sympathize with the misfortune of misfortunate people, and that I shouldn't aspire to being special like special people are. Someone like me can be helped just by having someone reassuringly declare that. Although in my case, it might be better to describe myself as a malfunction instead of an anomaly. As a failed human who hasn't been disposed of yet, I have to watch out. I have to be careful. Hitagi Senjugahara's special nature, Tsubasa Hainkawa's genetic evolution, and Koyomi Araragi's exceptionalism are all things that could only be found at Naoetsu High School. Those kinds of characters wouldn't appear in Shishikurasaki High School. From now on, for the foreseeable future, the type of people I have to deal with are especially ordinary, overwhelmingly ordinary boys and girls like Amiko Uragase.